There's only one North Star, in my personal opinion, as to where things are geographically in the Book of Mormon, and that is the Hill Cumorah.
Tell me about some of these sites, some of these places that you visited, and what are some of the interesting things that you discovered or learned in this process?
Putnam County has 100 or more of these mysterious chambers that are built that are kind of shaped like oval shaped inside the hills. So you go into a hill and they're bricked off. And when you see the bricks off of there, you can actually go in and almost live in one of these places. And the sites are just there. There are so many places in North America that we have just glossed over.
Welcome into another Key David podcast here on Zion Media. I'm joined by, of course, David the Lion Douglas, with an excused absence from the Key, Trevor the Key Keys. He had a prior engagement, but we're also joined by our guest, Kels Goodman. And I must say, Kels, if that's really your first name, that is the coolest first name. I don't know if it's short for something. Kels, that's a name I've never heard of before.
Kels is short for Kelly. And when I was born, I didn't find out till I was about 30 that when I was born, my birth certificate actually said that I was a female for many years. And somewhere between the delivery room and the doctor's office, somebody didn't get the note that it said F rather than M. And so for years and years and years, school, I mean, I got tampon samples in the mail. I was a woman for a good 30 years. And I remember telling my folks, you have misnamed me. And so I started just somebody nicknamed me Kels, and it just stuck until I was 30. And then my mom finally found the birth certificate and says, oh, son, guess what? It says here you're a female, and we've changed it since. But obviously I was everywhere I went, I was known as a female because they use that birth certificate. And everything. So
that's hilarious. So truly the transition has happened. Fortunately, you didn't have to do any of the other stuff that goes with that.
Thank goodness.
Sorry. Was awesome. Well, Kels, welcome to Zion Media. And I see in the background you have Hidden in the Heartland podcast. So you got a podcast. Tell me a little bit about your podcast. What is it you guys are doing? And then I want to jump into kind of the documentary that I understand you were involved in creating, and jump into some of this Heartland stuff.
Well, the podcast is kind of on pause. We haven't done a podcast for probably about 10 months, mostly because of work and other things and other creative stuff. Plus, doing an episode of Hidden in the Heartland required a lot of research, and we were trying to keep it up weekly. And I was working with a good friend named Mark Burris, who is from Palmyra. And Hidden in the Heartland originated about 12 years ago. I used to work for Blendtec, and I did all of their comedy videos that you see on YouTube called Will It Blend. And I did that for about 8 years, and it was very successful. And then I had a career shift and met Rod Meldrum about 12 years ago, and was very interested in the Heartland research, because for many years I had that notion that the Book of Mormon happened in Central America, and that's where it was, and there was no question, and we move forward. And he started questioning, through his research about the Book of Mormon happening in North America as opposed to Central America. And so it caused me to want to do a lot of research. So I dedicated a lot of my life to doing a TV show called Hidden in the Heartland, and it played on KJazz here in Utah for a while. And we only produced 10 episodes. That's all I could afford. I kickstarted some money, but a lot of it just came out of my own pocket. And my wife and I would go visit places all over the United States. And our ultimate goal was not to necessarily tell the Rod Meldrum story or, the others who are part of the Heartland research, but just to talk about, the whole big question has been who lived in America long before Columbus, and just ask it and just find out what we know, that whether the Book of Mormon happened in Central America or whether it happened in North America, it doesn't matter. It's about as important as is U of U a better team than BYU? That it's about that important. It's not
Right.
ultimately important, but it's interesting and it's fascinating. And occasionally you run into things. And so I started questioning a lot of stuff when it came to where it happened, and it was awesome because it really forced me to really dive into the reading of the Book of Mormon more than I ever had before. And I did.
With the intent of geography. So you were reading it with the intent of geography. Okay.
That's right.
And
Reading with the intent of geography. And then, of course, from that, I really started to understand more about things such as secret combinations and government and how, the truth is the Book of Mormon, sad to say, is mostly political. I mean, it's a political book, and it's not just a book about being good and being bad, even though that's the ultimate thing, is to come unto Christ. That is the ultimate goal, is to come unto Christ. But all of the details all through it. I mean, we just finished Ether, and Ether named two prophets, and that was, the brother of Jared and Ether. And everybody else were all leaders and battles, people who were in battle and people who were good and bad and just the constant, up and down. And so there's a political element to it. And then there's the constant discussion about the promised land. And when you talk about the promised land, there's definitely the promised land is what is a promised land? It's something where the it's a land that's either really good or really bad, and not in the middle. It's one of those that when things are good, they're really good, and when they're not good, they're not. They're really bad. They're cursed, and that's the sign of a promised land. And we see America being in that boat. The United States has provided so much more, and you can get into the whole racism and gender talks and right wing versus left wing. We can get into all that stuff, but take it all aside, America has been amazing, and thus, if this has been a promised land, this is where the Book of Mormon had to have happened. That's where I've struggled to see Mexico and Central America being a promised land. And so that's what led me to go, okay, it has to be in America. And there's only one North Star, in my personal opinion, as to where things are geographically in the Book of Mormon, and that is the Hill Cumorah. And that's the only place that we know that has that Joseph Smith and history has told us where things are. Everything else is, we probably will never know where Zarahemla is or any of those places. We can take guesses, but we only know so much. And so I thought it would be fun to go in and just see who lived here long before Columbus. And so Stephanie, my wife, and I, we went and did a lot of traveling for a couple of years, and we would go to sites, and the sites are just there. There are so many places in North America that we have just glossed over. And how many people have never heard of Cahokia? Cahokia is an amazing.
Tell me,
place.
I've never heard of Cahokia.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of these sites, some of these places that you visited, and what are some of the interesting things that you discovered or learned in this process?
Well, one of the places, Cahokia, and if you were to go on a tour that either Rod or Wayne May gives, you stop at some of these places, but then there's even more beyond that. So some of the amazing spots are Cahokia is outside of St. Louis. The only thing is the dating for Cahokia makes it only as early as about 900 AD. But I personally feel like that dating is very fluid, and not just to fit my mold. I think Cahokia was important somewhere, somehow. It's right by a river, and it's on the other side of the river from St. Louis. So it's actually on I think it's the Illinois side or Iowa side. Whatever the eastern part of St. Louis, whichever state that is, I forgot. But Cahokia is a great spot where the mounds are still there. They have a diorama. They have a whole visitor center. And somebody actually has sunk money into making Cahokia a nice place to visit and to imagine what it was like, 1,000+ years ago. And so to me, yeah, maybe it's not totally Nephite time frame, but carbon dating is so, like, it's not exact, because we've never been able to perfect dating, because nobody's been able to go back in time and says, yep, that was 1,200 years ago, it said so, I got it proven, it's 100%. It's just, it's so fluid. So Cahokia is one. The other one is, there's a place called American Stonehenge, which is up in oh goodness, it's in Massachusetts. And I have not been there. I had a scheduled date there, but then COVID hit and I could not get across to New York to get to that place. We were scheduled to do a season 3 of Hidden in the Heartland. We never got forward to doing it, but that was one of the spots, was American Stonehenge. It's an ancient site where you can tell sacrifices were made. And you see a lot of the same elements that you see in Stonehenge, but you see here in America. There is another group of sites in a place called, now in the Book of Mormon, you see Omer in the Book of Ether. There's a moment where we talk about this on one of our episodes, where there's the place called Ablam, where Omer runs off because his son has taken over the kingdom and he's run off for safety at a place called Ablam, and it says on there that he goes to the Hill Cumorah and then he goes east for a long way till he hits the water. Well, where's that? That's New York. And right there, right above New York, is a county called Putnam County, and Putnam County has 100 or more of these mysterious chambers that are built, that are kind of shaped like oval shaped inside the hills. So you go into a hill and they're bricked off. And when you see the bricks off of there, you can actually go in and almost live in one of these places. And most of the locals have no idea where they're from, and because nobody claims them, they're slowly getting kind of destroyed by business and by growth and whatever. But there's about 100 that still exist, and those are amazing places that you can see. One other fascinating thing that I found was there is an organization called the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. This is a society who meets every October, and I know they have a website and they have a Facebook page, and they always are constantly posting ancient American things. None of them are Mormon except for Wayne May, he goes, and I think there's one other Mormon. The rest of them are just fascinated, interesting people. And it's amazing to hear. They could do a conference every October in northern Michigan. And I've gone about 3 or 4 times, and it's amazing to see these guys pulling out. Some of them are like experts, others are just enthusiasts. And most, I think the average age of the group is like 70. And so they're all older guys, and they pull out all of this stuff, and they actually use the Book of Mormon as a reference for some of their stuff. It's wild hearing them saying, yeah, this could be Lehi, this could be whatever, while they're, smoking and, and doing whatever. And it's amazing to hear these guys talking about the Book of Mormon as if it happened in North America, but they're not religious whatsoever. And they talk about the ancient materials that they have found. Copper in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of copper of Michigan is filled with copper. I mean, I could go on, and that's why I had to do a podcast so that we could, but to confirm everything, I had to do a lot of research. And so we probably put out about maybe 20, 25 episodes separate from the TV show. So we had the TV show that we did, and then we had the podcast, and they're all on our YouTube channel.
I almost feel like you need to do like a making of Hidden in the Heartland, just because how many places you went, and you've got so much footage. It would be great to see you just explain what it was like to go with your wife and Rod and meet up with Wayne and some of the other experts that you met.
Yeah, and it's a matter of putting these things in perspective. One of the notions that a lot of people have had in making hidden in the heartland or the Book of Mormon geographical is how big was it? And one of the things that I preach hard when it comes to talking about this is one of the things we got to remember is that the Nephites, the Jaredites, and the Mulekites were all three in the same vicinity, and for about 200 to 300 years, neither knew the other existed.
Right.
So their nations were not massive. So when people throw out the Nephites were all through North America and Central America, I struggle with that. The numbers just don't match that. I argue that the Nephite nation might have been maybe a couple of million. I mean, that's what the Jaredite nation ended at, was about 2 million was the high point, the biggest number we read when we read the text. But to think that they're all the way from Hill Cumorah all the way down is just unrealistic, in my opinion. I think in other words, I believe Christ did visit Central America. There's evidence of it. It just isn't the Nephites or the Lamanites. It's another group. There's bound to be other groups that have had, and he said so. He said, other sheep I've got to go visit. So anyway.
I sent you asked me, we were visiting a little bit ago,
Yeah.
just I think it was on Friday or when was it?
Yeah, Saturday night before I went to the BYU game. That's right.
Yeah. So
BYU game.
yeah, and just so you know, I sent you a text of our Zion's Cumorah, which is a compilement of all the books and presentations that we've been able to collect since starting Zion Media, and included in it is the Menha, which I only kind of briefly talked about with you, which I'm really excited for you to get to read, because in the Menha they describe geology, and that's what's opened me up to this new model. Well, it's not a new model, it's been a model since Joseph Smith's time, but one that doesn't get a lot of attention, which is the Continental model, which we've talked a lot with Lance Weaver on. And so I'm really intrigued and interested in seeing what your perspective is as you read some of the books like the Book of Samuel and Moroni and so forth. So you'll get to explore that now that I've sent you that link.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm totally excited to read it. I knew nothing about it. And so with you, David, coming and telling me, I'm excited to explore this more.
So it appears from at least the research I've done, they're in Alma 60. Is it 65? I can't remember. Alma 65 or Alma 63. There's a big group of people that go northward. It's like there's 5,400 men plus their women plus their children. So I mean, this could have been a company of 20,000 or 30,000 people that go northward, and the Nemenha is about the time of these people that left there. Corianton takes a ship and he goes east, and Haggoth goes to the West Sea or something like that. But it is an interesting concept. And for me, I love what you said at the beginning of this episode, which was, it's the difference between, the University of Utah football team and the BYU football team. Like I tell people all the time, listen, it could have taken place on Jupiter and I'd still believe it because of the smart teachings, but it is fascinating. And as we've started this channel, people are like, Shane, where do you land on this? I'm like, dude, the jury's still out for me. I'm hearing what the people have to say about Mesoamerica. I'm learning about this Continental model. I'm learning about the Heartland model. And I agree, Kels, there were people living throughout all of it. Now, whether they were the Nephites and the Mulekites and the Jaredites, like that's what we got to determine. But there were people on this land, no question. I was just in Mexico. There's stuff down there. There were people down there, and they were doing stuff, and they had information, and they were building things. And it's evident there were people here on the North American continent for sure for a long time. So
I think, Shane, it's a very good point, and you're very right. And for me, like I said, I feel like there's one North Star, and that is the Hill Cumorah.
Totally.
And so when somebody tries to, that's the one thing I do have to vehemently, like with BYU and Farms and some of those organizations who've done amazing work, and I would never detract from, there's this series that's out right now called oh goodness, the Scott Christopher's in, and where he goes to Mexico. They've started it this year where he goes to Mexico and he goes to all these sites.
I see it. It's actually
Mormon
very
Spectral.
well. Yeah, it's actually very well done.
Very well done. They have a budget.
Yeah.
And Scott, the guy who's in that, is a good friend of mine, and he actually does the voiceover for the TV show Hidden in the Heartland. And he went and he got a lot of flack from, for being the voiceover for the Heartland show, and now he's in Central America, and it's just like, he goes, man, and it's a little fight that doesn't need to happen, because the research, we have to be open-minded. And that's kind of my argument with the Heartland group, is that while I'm consider myself leaning Heartland, I can change if new truth comes out. I don't play the game, but it's gotten to that point, and it needs to kind of cool down. So we're discussion.
I wonder if Scott gets any flack for doing the voiceover for the temple ceremony, the endowment session, because he's in there too.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's very good, like, at comedy, and we've done some comedy bits and stuff like that, and we're just really good friends. And we did a fun piece called the making of, and if you get a chance you can find that on YouTube. He is great in the making of the short 10-minute film. But back to the Heartland, the thing is, so that's where there's little North Stars for me. With the other North Star for me is Zelf's Mound. And if we know the history of Zelf's Mound, we know where Zelf's Mound is. And according to church, and all this again is according to Joseph Smith. It's according to, to what he has told us. And over the years, we've evolved into this other Hill Cumorah. And while I believe BYU and Farms and that group have done amazing work, and I would never negate the work, I do have to vehemently disagree with another Hill Cumorah. I really tried during my research during this show to look for, okay, did somebody else say something about another Hill Cumorah? And nobody ever said anything about any other hill until the early 1900s. And then that's because you have to bring the hill close to the rest of the elements of the Hill Cumorah. People were going to the Hill Cumorah and back to wherever, Zarahemla. And that's a 3,000-mile walk if everything was in Central America. So that, to me, kind of throws that off as far as that's concerned. And so to me, the hill has to be near these other lands. While yes, it's long walks, it's not, that's, when the saints walked from Nauvoo, well, not Nauvoo, let's see, from
essentially Nauvoo, yeah.
Nauvoo, and then Nebraska. I went on that walk. I mean, back in 97, I carried a camera for 3 months, and I walked from Omaha, Nebraska to Salt Lake and followed the reenactment of that. And that took 3 months, and that was 1,100 miles and on flat roads. So if you want to try to tell me that anybody walked from the Yucatan Peninsula up to the Hill Cumorah, I'm sorry. I struggle with that. And I think we need to be realistic about size, about how things are, and realize that it's not like us hopping on a plane and going there. But, so anyway, so if we stick to those, what I've been doing is the last year or two, I've been doing a Facebook Live with my wife where we were doing Come Follow Me. And we were giving the spiritual side, and then I would slip in the geographical side once in a while, every week on there, and studied the Book of Mormon. I read it like furiously. But this time I'm going to start a new study this year where it's going to be strictly geographical. And where I've got one of those new journaled Books of Mormon, and I'm just going to write down everything, and I'm going to start just mapping everything throughout next year. And I'm hoping that I I can create my own map of
I love
Mormon
that.
lands. So
If you want, we've had a guy on that's done this very same thing. He's a geologist. His name's Lance Weaver.
okay,
And you can go to his site. It's gatheredin.one, and he's kind of done that. But I think it's a good exercise.
yeah, it totally.
Go through and just map it out. And I think when we read the scriptures with like a certain intent, like right now, I'm reading the scriptures, for instance, I want to understand the bitter cup. I really want to understand the bitter cup. And so I'm reading to understand what is the bitter cup. And it just changes how you read the scriptures. Instead of just reading to read it, now you're reading it because you're like, okay, if any geographical anything is mentioned, like needs to be in consideration. I think you bring up a really good point. The North Star being, we know where the Hill Cumorah is. Like we know exactly where it is. And so we have to take that into consideration when we start laying out these maps for how could this be. So anyways, I really love that you pointed that out. And I think that's what lends so much credence to the Heartland model.
Well, the Heartland group right now, one of the things that I disagree with the Heartland group, that is one of their big North Stars that they think is there, and they think that Zarahemla is a Nauvoo. And I struggle with that. I went on the first.
I actually struggle with that as well, because I was like, man, there would be, or in my mind, Zarahemla is a pretty sizable city. You should be able to find some remnants of this city, some real remnants of something like that. And I think that's one of the big issues. Is it's easy, and that's what maybe makes that Mesoamerica model so appealing. Is there's so many ancient pyramid.
Well, yeah, it looks great.
There's just it's just like, look at this, look at
it. It looks great, and that's why BYU. But you know what's interesting is when I got my hands on the book of their first trip, BYU's first trip to Central America, and it was in 1910, and I read the whole journal that this guy kept. And what was funny was throughout the whole journal, I did not read one thing about Book of Mormon. They were going to any Book of Mormon lands. They didn't even say that in the journal. Now maybe they were, but from what I read, I remember not seeing anything about, they didn't say anything. It wasn't until 1960 when somebody took that journal and typed it up, and then they wrote in the front, hey, we're on our way to Book of Mormon lands. And then when you actually read it, nobody ever says, oh, we're on our way to Book of Mormon lands in 1910. And so the Hill Cumorah, the two Hill Cumorah theory is something that came a little later and was, kind of recreated to keep everything close to it. And of course the work is amazing. I mean, there's definitely stuff down there that needs to be studied and preserved, but the thing is, you don't see any of that. You see very little of it in North America. They spent very little time in North America studying anything in North America. And to me, it's a tragedy. And granted, I think a lot of us, when we came to America and we started to, and we talk about a lot of this in Hidden in the Heartland, where what is it called? The idea that God brought us to America and that we kind of trampled on a lot of the Native Americans. We destroyed a lot of their history because we made them sort of like one fit. And I don't mean to, get political or on any of that level. But there was damage that we did do to Native Americans, just not everybody. And
it talks about that. It talks about that in the Book of Mormon, and you got to take that into consideration. That's our prophecy. All right, Kels, I told you at the start of this episode, I got to run.
Okay.
And I apologize. This has been amazing. Are you located here in Utah?
I'm in Orem. I'm right in Orem.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. Well, we need to go to lunch.
I'd love to.
Totally interested in your production and the things you've done. I'm going to leave you in good hands here with David the Lion Douglas, because he is a Heartlander guy, kind of at heart. So I think there's a lot more to this discussion, and a lot of our people that watch our program are very interested in this topic. So I'm going to run. Kels, it was great to meet you.
All right.
You're in good hands with David Douglas, and I look forward to meeting you in the flesh.
All right. Thanks, brother. Have good on your trip. So.
Hey, see ya.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah, I one thing I want to see if we can pivot over to is talking more about your experience in making this documentary
Okay.
and like how it started, how you were able to get all those experts, because you already said on your podcast you do a lot of research before each episode. I can't imagine what it was like to make a whole series and to do another series which you make available on your channel.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with the Hidden in the Heartland series?
Well, Rod kind of pointed me in directions. He kind of sent me to, I went on his tour and read some of the books and met Wayne May. But beyond that, I just knew there was so much more. And at first, I remember watching some of the videos that Rod had because I went to one of their organizational meetings that was not just the conference, but an actual like meeting. And I talked about my work. I had just finished doing Will It Blend with Blendtech, and I had just left
Yeah.
Blendtech. And so I was kind of in a looking for something new. And Rod told me about this. I became, interested in the topic. And then he, took me, sent me to several places, to people to talk to. And I just realized that this was a bigger world. So I was originally going to make one documentary, and I went to, let's see, I went to a media company that's owned by Deseret Book that does, film distribution, and to my good friend Art, and I told him all about this idea of doing this documentary on that, and I even pitched it to BYU TV at a time in which they were looking for new content, and I decided I was just going to have to do this myself, and so it went from a single documentary to like, oh, this is going to have to go on and on. There's just too much content. And so I kept finding new content and finding new players as I would, such as the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society, such as just stuff that I can find on the internet. I specifically looked for people who were not members of the church. I really wanted a non biased, because like a lot of Native Americans, they provide a lot of the great information that we found,
They do.
and really good. There are some Native Americans that have a tendency to filter it with a Mormon slant, and so I have to kind of stop them and say, okay, I'm trying to be objective here, so that when somebody does come after us with challenging it, we can just say, hey, we're just pointing at the information. I'm just here to report. I'm not here to say this is where this is and this is, and so I decided to when you watch it in the Heartland, we never make an assumption as to where some things are. We might make guesses, or we might make suggestions and let the audience, choose. And so we were, through Rod, we were able to meet other great people, such as one of the great ones was a guy named William Connor. William Connor wrote a book called Iron Age America, and William Connor worked with another archaeologist when he was young, and William, by the time I met him, he was already old, and I don't even know if he's still alive. But 10 years ago, we sat down, did an interview with him, and he talked about for example, the iron furnaces, and that there's a hill up in Ohio called Spruce Hill, and Spruce Hill is set in a perfect, and again, this is not a member of the church. It's set up on a perfect hill, on an area where it's great for smelting. And when he was young, he found 35 actual furnaces. And he even said that even one of them he saw was still warm because it was buried. When they're done smelting, they just kind of bury it and put it on there, and there's still, ash and leftovers there. But he has found furnaces where they had to get things hot enough to make things like weapons, like, parts or whatever, machinery, things that Nephi totally did. The things that all of those people, during the time of war had to do. They had to continue to produce weapons. And this was a great place to do it, was right in Ohio. And there's evidence of smelting.
Yeah.
In fact, he still has, I don't know if you've seen that, he still has like an axe that's in its mold.
It's hard to tell. I do know what you're talking about. It's hard to tell that it's an axe. It just looks like a iron, like it definitely looks like a mold, and the iron's still in there, and it looks curved on the inside at least. So
it's almost like you almost just want to get it cracked open, and you're just going to hurt it, you destroy it, and you're going to blow it all. But opening that action figure, that Star Wars action figure, you don't want to open it, but you want to play with it, but you can't because that destroys the value. So it's the same thing here, same concept. And so there's a lot of the smelting evidence that you see in Ohio. Copper is another big one. Michigan is big, and copper is one of the big things that's named in the list of metals every time that they talk about, the things that they had that made them rich. And the best place is a place called Isle Royal up in Michigan. It's the big copper deposit that, when these guys meet, the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society, they meet near this copper place because they know, copper is one of the big things they talk about. And so I went ahead and just went to all these places and finally cut stuff together. And then there was a guy named Ryan Fisher, and Ryan Fisher produced a series called Nephite Explorer. And
I remember that part.
You remember that? And he's a news guy. He would film a lot of news for channels. If he'd just hop in his car, grab his camera, and he'd go get second unit footage of something and send it to the affiliate. That was his job. And so he had the experience of being able to news gather, and he went to he started doing his own show, but his was more like news. And in my show, I actually have a certain style to it, to where I actually have reenactments, which is what costs the most in producing it. And so we would reenact Zelf's Mound, and we reenacted John Wesley Powell. We reenacted, Abraham Lincoln in the Book of Mormon, and had that discussion. Some really fun stuff.
My friend Michael Birkland in one of the
Mike's in one of them. That's right.
And I one of the people I was really fascinated or blown away with in the series is when you interviewed, I forget what kind of science it is, but it's the kind where the stars are lined up with the geographic area. What's that science called?
It's called archaeoastronomy.
Yeah, that gentleman I thought was fascinating. He's not a member of the church.
Not
as far as I call.
He's very religious, and he considers himself a minister, for his faith.
What was his name again?
His name is, oh goodness, you would ask me, and I would forget. And I feel so bad if he watches this. So it's just, forgive me, brother. It's your name. And but he was a great guy. So I forgot his name. I apologize. But he was he even came to Utah once and spoke at a conference. But when I interviewed him back in Michigan. That's where I found him, was at that conference.
Really? So have you explored any of the mounds here in Utah? Because Utah actually has mound sites as well. Giants have been found, which, I believe could have been Jaredites. Have you explored any of the locations here?
The only places I've explored have been with Utana and Shem Jessup, where we went down to
they're great people.
They're great people, and they have their own organization here in Utah. And we went down to Manti. And if you go behind the temple in Manti, up on the hill, there are some markings that are up there that seem possibly ancient. I mean, they're obviously ancient, but what they are is could be a Hebrew offset. It could be something like that. So I've been to that place, and then there's a similar place down in St. George that has there's about 8 or 9 locations where there are petroglyphs with those exact symbols all over Utah.
I want to bring up one more person. I'm not sure if I've ever heard you talk about him, but Terry Carter. Have you?
They're good friend of mine. I see him in the grocery store all the time.
You
And
here we
joke around. He's a good, yeah, he lives here near me, and Terry's a good guy, and we get into, Bigfoot discussions and alien discussions. So it's kind of fun. I don't know if you've ever been to or heard of Phenomicon, but that's where Terry shows up. Is he shows up? Phenomicon is a convention in Vernal put on by one of the guys who's part of Skinwalker Ranch.
okay?
And so it gets into the phenomenon side, and half of it I don't believe, but some of it's very real. Skinwalker Ranch is a whole nother discussion, and I trust those guys. They've got some really good information. The Skinwalker Ranch guys and the Blind Frog Ranch guys, who are they're just a few miles away. Very interesting. But Terry Carter is a wealth of information on all kinds of that content. And every once in a while I've thrown stuff to him, and we'll have a talk, and he's a good guy. He's a really good guy.
So were there any interesting experiences, maybe more behind the scenes, that you had? Because I know that Rod Meldrum and Wayne May are in your series. They appear. There's actually another lady with blonde hair who's very knowledgeable. I saw her at one of Wayne's events. Can't think of her name, but she was also talking about how America essentially just erased a lot of this evidence that's benefits the Heartland model. Do you remember her? Who I'm talking about?
Yeah, Amberly.
Amberly.
Amberly gives a really good discussion about having to what you need to have to live the law of Moses.
Uh-huh.
And she has other discussions too, but one of the stuff that I had her go into that she would a talk she would give was about how part of why the Heartland seems more realistic towards Book of Mormon times is because in the Book of Mormon times they lived the law of Moses, and there were certain elements that they needed to have to live the full law of Moses that did not exist in Central America. And that was one of her arguments that she was making, was that it had to be in North America because there's some animals, there's some plants, there's some things that you have to live that full law of Moses that she studied, that she says was not indigenous to Central America. And I didn't do enough research on it to verify it like I like to, but she definitely had great information concerning that, which was a good argument. It's a good argument.
Yeah,
made.
I'd love to meet her or get to talk with her more. And I'll tell you, going to Mexico recently, my eyes definitely were opened. Lance really helped with this as well. But, I think I shared with you already that one of the sites seems to have the same layout as the Solomon's Temple, where everything's just placed right in the same or proper location at Monte Alban.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I wanted to ask in regards to Wayne and Amberly and also Rod is, was there any cool experiences that you had while filming Hidden in the Heartland, that you were able to have with those three experts?
Well, I think one of the fun ones was going up to Rod and I went up to, what is it called? We were down in New Mexico at a place called Los Lunas.
Yeah,
that's where the Decalogue Stone is, and we had to hike an hour to the Decalogue Stone. And the thing is about the Decalogue Stone, a lot like Zelf's Mound, what amazed me was it was like you had to know what tumbleweed to walk by to get to the spot. There is no sign that says Zelf's Mound. There is no sign that says Decalogue Stone here. And you really kind of needed to know where to go. And so there definitely had to be sort of a spiritual finding, to be able to find some of these places. So if we go to Zelf's Mound is an amazing one where we went with Rod to Zelf's mound, and we found the mound, and that was described. And across the street was this lady, and we decided to just knock on her door to try to get information about the history of the mound. How long have you lived here? Do you know who owns it? All this, we're just trying to get background information by just knocking on doors. And so we went, and this lady just let us in, and she let me film her. And we just walked. It was literally there was no calling or nothing. She was just there and ready to go. And and she had her own ancient collection. She had arrowheads galore.
I think I remember that scene.
Yeah, it was on the. I think we did a little bit on the episode, but there was arrowheads galore. There's all kind of artifacts. Her husband had it, and he'd passed away. She just kept it, and he also had anchor stones, and to find anchor stones meant that there was water. When you find anchor stones.
Absolutely.
That's one very cool thing, is that he had the anchor stones. The other one that's really amazing was in Nauvoo, across the water, where, of course, where they felt like Zarahemla might be. There's a guy there named Terry. I can't remember his last name, but he was an old guy. He's probably passed away now. But he had a really good guy, Terry Sanders. So Terry Sanders in a place called Benton Sport, Iowa, Benton Sport, Iowa. And so it's about an hour west of Nauvoo. And we went to Benton Sport because there was some cool sights along the way. But we met this guy, and he had the most amazing collection. And so on Hidden in the Heartland podcast, I actually took some footage. It wasn't part of the normal episode. I just made a separate episode, just like a couple of minutes long, featuring Terry Sanders and talking about his findings. So he has probably 10,000 arrowheads that he's picked up. Everything he has in his collection, he found. He would roam for decades.
Oh.
That guy, and so his collection was in this old building, beat up building in little town Benton Sport, with a population of probably a few hundred. A couple of little fun shops that had some neat artifacts there, and he had also anchor stones. He found anciently there. So everything he says he found is in this neighborhood. And the other thing he found was a palm tree that was what do you call it? That was like had been protected somehow. So he found a palm tree. There's a word for it, and I forgot the word all of a sudden.
Not petrified.
Petrified.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had a petrified palm tree in it, which kind of woke me up to the concept that the climate has probably changed. There's a lot of discussion about, one of the biggest arguments in the Book of Mormon is, oh, well, there's no snow. How could it be in Central and, how could it be in North America? They never say snow. And my argument to that is, well, they never talk about rain either. And they never talk about any of the other, they barely momentarily, they only talk about weather when there's a dearth. Yeah. When the Lord cast it and made it so.
Well, it makes me think of the phrase of, what do you think the Lord means when he says the isles of the sea? Like America, although it's big, it's not nearly as big as the old world. And we're basically two huge islands connected by a strip of land.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so if you see a river and say, this is that river, that can change in a matter of a decade, because you get a decade of changing of climate, and that hill will no longer be there. That river will no longer be there. That thing will no longer. You can't totally lean 100% on a physical structure to say that's where this is. because it can change and it will change. And so that's why we go back to the North Star, and that is the Hill Cumorah.
Yeah.
And the Hill Cumorah is a whole nother, that's another piece of interesting thing that a lot of people, one of the other elements that we found that you guys may have talked about it, but our friend whose kid fell into the Hill Cumorah,
one of my favorite stories,
is a great story. And what's interesting is, I talk a little bit about the ancient, the mysterious chambers of Putnam County, New York. If you go to the and you can see it on one of my episodes, if you go to Putnam County, and we talked earlier about 100 of the leftover of these ancient chambers and how they were built, and you see pictures of these chambers.
Yeah.
The picture that you see in the Hill Cumorah of the second chamber looks just like the way it's built, the way the slate is used in little sections to hold up the room. A man-made slate.
Images of this, right?
What's that?
You have images of this?
Yes, there's images of this. The images that's given to us by our friends who have it in the Hill Cumorah. You've probably seen the pictures.
Those
of the hole in the Hill Cumorah.
I've had to see a comparison.
Yeah, you compare that to these ancient chambers that are all over Putnam County, and they're identical. They're built the same way, where it's a hole, and the slate is used to hold it up like a room. Like it's almost like the inner part of a house, but it's done all naturally. So
I want our viewers to know that I'd like to have you be a regular on a new series that we've really only released one episode for, called Ancient Answers, where Latter-day Chad and also Lance Weaver are also going to be regulars on that. Honestly, Latter-day Chad and I have been taking up this series, and Lance and hopefully folks like you could come on and share more of these insights. And we've already discussed it, the opportunity to be able for you to share more of what you've done with Hidden in the Heartland and your additional research, but just the convergence of all of our minds on that series as well. So you'll for our viewers, you guys are going to get to see a lot more of Kels in the future, or at least on regular, and it'll be great to just have you share your knowledge, Kels. And
I would love to be on. There's so much to talk about that, like I said, I couldn't get done on a weekly basis doing the Hidden in the Heartland podcast, so we've stopped the podcast. But you can go to pretty much Hidden in the Heartland on YouTube, just type it in, and you'll see we had 10 episodes. We have a bunch of sub episodes, like we do separate interviews, and then we started just talking, just me and Mark just talking, and you came on one of our episodes, and we had David, the artist, come on, and we've had a few guests come on, but mostly it was just we were trying to make sure we had the research. So I have a lot of research, but it's like I haven't been able to organize it because I just hadn't had the time to make it a weekly show. So I'm happy to present what I know and what I learned to you guys, in hopes of maybe making some kind of sense between what you've learned and what I've learned. And there's a lot out there. It is filled with a ton of stuff. So,
well, I'm going to tell you, thank you so much for joining us on the Key of David, and I'm glad that you were able to meet Shane. This was like a first time for you to meet Shane, or Shane to meet you, and I think it'll be really great to have lunch together as well. And
I agree.
And honestly, have you, like we just said, have you on the Ancient Answers series. And, are there any, final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, just, when you read this year's reading, for me, the focus was on the biggest thing I pulled out of it was secret combinations out of the Book of Mormon, and started to understand what a secret combination was. But, if you constantly just go to the text of the Book of Mormon is the most important part to understanding not just the geographical side, but also our life in general and where we belong and why we're here and why we got the book in the first place to read it. There's a reason for it, and it's more than just good touchy-feelies. There's real information that helps us to be a better people, especially in these latter days. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm so excited to, have this opportunity to make more videos with you, or at least discuss more of these topics. I don't know if you probably don't see your phone right now, but I already texted Lance and Latter-day Chad, and they're already, typing away on our four-way chat there. But it's gonna be a lot of fun.
see it on my phone. You see what a nerd I am. I'm a Star Wars nerd, guys. I had a Star Wars shirt on earlier, and Stephanie said, "Nah, you better look a little nicer." I said, "They're not going to look that nice. They're going to know who I am." So anyway,
Well, I think that shirt's pretty nice. It looks kind of oriented,
yeah,
for
it
sure.
was. It's my son said it looks like a shirt that Captain Kirk would wear when he's not on duty. So there you go. But
Thank
anyway,
thank you for joining us on the Captivated. And as for myself, we always end this way. I always think it's a little unique. But as for myself, David the Lion Douglas, and Shane, who's not here, and of course Trevor Keys, and our guest Kels Goodman. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you in the next video.
Come together, searching for the way, guided by the Spirit, shining every day. Voices call from Zion, beckoning the pure, gathering the faithful where the truth is sure. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your way. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the truth. It shines today. Gather all the nations, call them to the fold, where Zion's truth and glory brighter than the gold. Seeking for the answers for what we never knew, finding in the Spirit all things pure and true. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your Spirit. Follow the light, follow the truth. It shines today. Follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your way. Follow the truth. Don't lose your way. It shines today. Gather all the nations, call them to the fold, with Zion's truth and glory brighter than the gold. Seeking for the answers for what we